Resting on a ramp along the Lytham Sea wall are a pair of old rusted anchors. While clearly a monument to something, the plaque is missing and has been for many years. Without any other information, many people don't know what these anchors represent or why they're here. Lots of locals and visitors think they're a memorial to the 1805 Battle of Trafalgar, a battle that predates the town of Lytham. These anchors are in fact a memorial to one of the most important events in the history of Britain's RNLI, the Southport and St Anne's lifeboat disaster, the worst disaster in the organisation's history. On the night of December 5th, 1886, a German barque named Mexico had departed from Liverpool, bound for Ecuador. After a few quiet days, she was caught in a violent gale and ran aground in the Ribble Estuary. The estuary is notoriously difficult to navigate, with sandbanks regularly moving around in the current. Lighting their lamps and launching distress flares, the 12-man crew of the Mexico tied themselves to the ship's rigging to stop the wind and water from blowing them away as they waited for rescue. Spotting the flares, the three estuary towns of Lytham, St Anne's and Southport each launched their lifeboat towards the stricken Mexico. Rowing for 3 hours, the Southport lifeboat Eliza Fernley was first to reach the Mexico. As they came alongside, the boat was thrown over by a particularly strong wave. Many of the crew were dashed against the Mexico's steel hull and killed, while others were swept away and drowned. Of the 16-man crew, only 2 survived as they swam back to shore. The St Anne's lifeboat, Laura Janet, was launched some 20 minutes after the Southport lifeboat, with the crew encountering difficulties upon launching that delayed them. The exact fate of the boat is unknown, and will likely never be known. All that historians do know is that Laura Janet never reached the Mexico. None of her crew swam ashore, and the boat was found washed bottom up the next morning. The entire crew of Laura Janet were lost. The Lytham lifeboat, Charles Biggs, launched around the same time as St Anne's Laura Janet, and made its way towards the Mexico. The Lytham crew had the longest journey to the Mexico, as the boat was nearly capsized several times as she took on huge amounts of water. As the Mexico had started to break up, the danger was enormous as the Lytham crew put their boat in the exact same spot the Southport crew had been capsized in. With exceptional skill, coxswain Thomas Clarkson brought Charles Biggs safely alongside and the Mexico's crew were offloaded. The 12 Germans were returned safely to shore, if quite cold and wet. To this day, the loss of 2 boats and the death of 27 lifeboatmen makes it the worst disaster in RNLI history. Among the St Anne's and Southport communities, the disaster had left 16 widows and 50 children without fathers. But despite the loss of life and the terrible conditions, the RNLI had successfully rescued the German crew. As a publicly funded institution, the RNLI is dependent on donations from the general public to operate. Following the disaster, Queen Victoria personally donated a large sum of money to a fund to support the widows and orphans of the disaster, as did Kaiser Wilhelm of the German Empire, as thanks for rescuing the German crew. A massive drive was also launched 5 years later, with the Lytham, St Anne's and Southport crews pulling their lifeboats through Manchester and collecting donations for the RNLI. This was the first recorded charity street collection in history and raised £15,000, the equivalent of £1.6 million today. The disaster also brought more attention to the RNLI, thanks to press coverage of the incident and the Manchester Parade. Within 10 years, the RNLI had double the income and could better equip its boats and crew. In the modern day, the Southport lifeboat station can launch 2 boats by itself, housing an Arctic 24 type and a D-class lifeboat. These 2 boats both being specialised in offshore and inshore rescues respectively. Today, the original Lytham lifeboat house still stands, built alongside the town's famous windmill, with the anchor monument resting on the original launch ramp that the lifeboat Charles Biggs was launched from. Although Lytham and St Anne's have two separate stations, these are now collectively managed and crewed as the Lytham St Anne's station, collectively holding a D-class lifeboat and a Sharon-class lifeboat. An upper area in the Lytham St Anne's station is open to the public as a small museum to the history of the station and as a reminder as to what happened on that night 139 years ago.